Hello, everyone. This is Stacy Stube here from Sobromo and Elsa Fitzgerald.
So I'm Jenni Sutton, the Development Director at Fashion Enter. We're based in London, in England. And I'm just going to kind of talk about what we do here and what our ethos is and how we help not only designers, but I think anyone that wants to get into the industry.
I created this content called Fashion Incubation, and there's so much positive things that are happening around the world in this space of revitalization of industry, passing on industry knowledge, but a knowledge that is more kind of, I think, grassroots, really from the historical aspect, but from the moving it forward. So I found out about Fashion Enter through London College of Fashion, and I was really excited about the programming you guys were doing. And the main point is for us to share notes on an international level, but on a kind of community and friendly coffee table side conversation. So let's start with a little bit about the background of the organization and how it was set up and what you guys are doing now.
Yeah, of course. So Fashion Enter, it was born out of a government initiative back in 2006. So my CEO is a lady called Jenni Holloway. She has been in the industry for 35 years, both as a senior buyer, set up her own label, and then she mentored young designers. So this was with a government initiative. And basically all the funding for that initiative dried up and the program had to stop. And that's when Jenni felt very strongly in that she wanted to continue that work. She really believed that a lot of young designers, they leave university and they just don't have that knowledge or the skills to actually successfully build a label within the industry. So that's really where Fashion Enter was born. She launched it in 2006. And we had this ethos that it was to support young designers with everything from generating sales, targeting the right market, helping them with their price points, fabric sourcing, and we just kind of realized a lot of that isn't really taught in universities, so it kind of sets someone up to fail because they don't have that industry knowledge. So that's where we really started, and I joined the company back in 2006 as well. We've just massively escalated really from that very small humble beginnings. There were 4 of us. We had a boutique in Croydon, and what we would do is we would support the local community by going into schools, going into colleges. We would teach students about all the different jobs in the industry. So you don't have to just be a designer. You could be a garment technologist, you could be a pattern cutter, like depending what your skill is and the direction you want to go in, there almost is a role in the fashion industry for you. So we really believe strongly in starting with education and starting with young people and teaching them what this industry was all about. And then when they were ready, and if they wanted to set up their own label, we then had a support system in place, which included a retail unit. We had a website, which is still running today, Fashion Capital, and it basically just gives them real business advice. So that's kind of how we started. And then over the years, we've had various retail boutiques. We've worked with councils within England in very degenerate areas that kind of needed that support. And then I think it was about 2012, we were approached by government to become a training provider. So we very much had this learning curve ourselves, and we moved into education and became a training provider for apprenticeships. We actually opened our own workshop before this because we found the biggest problem with designers was how to communicate with the manufacturer. They would just get completely screwed over. They didn't understand how what fabric they needed to source, how much fabric, what they really needed to be prepared for every meeting with the manufacturer. And we just found that the manufacturers weren't interested in the one-man band and the small designers that had the small orders. So we were very lucky. We secured a loan with ASOS, who are one of our major clients clients today, and we were able to open a small workshop where we could do sampling and short production runs. And that's how we would work with the designers. We would actually handhold them through that complete process, and we would support them with the sampling of their collections. So that's kind of how we moved into production. And then with the education arm, we then became really the only training provider in the UK that has a training academy within a live factory. So today, what we have in place today in London is we have our factory, which produces 12 to 15,000 garments a week. We have the fashion studio, which is sampling for the designers still. And then we have a training academy that supports learners that want to learn anything really from level 1, stitching, pattern cutting, right through to bespoke tailoring. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at now, and the journey it took us to get there. But we like to think of ourselves as really kind of like that one-stop shop for anyone that wants to get a job in the industry, whether that is setting up a label or they want to have a skill such as sewing or pattern cutting that will then progress into a real job. So yeah, well, there's quite a lot going on.
Yeah, no, it's very inspiring work, and I think that sets the pace for the possibility of the industry. But seeing the kind of gaps in knowledge, so I was on the other side, being a graduate from, you know, a master's in fashion entrepreneurship and innovation from London College of Fashion. Although they connected the dots within the network, and I had an amazing experience when I got out of school and I worked in a senior position for a fashion house, I was still very far removed from the manufacturing process.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I went to Indonesia that I started to see, wow, there's this whole realm of knowledge that's sort of like going to business school, but not really knowing how to set up a business, and not knowing, like, the step 1 is to register, step 2 is, you know, all these different structures. So when I came back to Baltimore, my hometown, I worked in manufacturing because I knew that there was a lack of knowledge for myself. And we did a similar thing. We've taken over an abandoned factory, and we call it the Fashion Factory School. So I say you're learning in the kitchen, but connecting the dots for that skilled knowledge that is very specialized. But the other thing we noticed is that in our city, we used to be second to New York for manufacturing, especially for menswear, but most of the industry has faded. So too, the trade skills had been exported. So we're starting the needle trade night school. So that's geared more towards, you know, the garment workers, the people that would be actually doing the construction. Some designers just want to literally have idea concepts, go to market, and that's a lot of work in itself. But if you are looking just to create, we need high quality garment. You're paying a premium to make it, you know, whether it's stateside or in the UK. And so you have to have the best quality standards. And currently, you know, if you have all the training systems far removed from the community, you can't achieve that. So there's no point having an entrepreneur create a business who can actually develop it locally, if that's the intention.
Exactly.
So, what do you think in terms of, you know, the future of those needle trades, and educating, say, the workers so they are upskilled? I see that you guys have some amazing program for that.
We do. I mean, where we're based in London, it's a borough called Haringey, and we've specifically chose that borough because it has a very multinational, lots of residents are multinational. So our workforce, we have 12 different nationalities from like Poland, Romania, and they are incredibly skilled. But we noticed it's an aging workforce, and the next generation are not interested in sort of working in a factory. There is a real stigma against it. So that's what we want in place in Haringey, is to make sewing and pattern cutting a very appealable kind of an appealing career to have. And that's where we kind of sort of promote our courses to young designers and just sort of say, if you don't know how to stitch or pattern cut, you can't be a designer. And then that's how people are starting to learn actually to be a pattern cutter. That's a career in itself, and they're actually very well paid. So in sort of Haringey, we have this multinational workforce, but then the borough itself has very high unemployment. So we're able to offer these courses for free to anyone that's unemployed that lives in the borough. And then there's that real progression and support for them because we're in that live factory environment. So that's kind of what we've got going on in London. We also most recently, we have opened a second factory in Wales. So we opened a factory which was the old Laura Ashley factory, and we saved 77 skilled jobs by doing that. So there's a lot of really skilled machinists that were able to kind of keep their jobs because we've opened this factory. But what we have noticed is that there is again a lack of kind of like the next generation coming through. So we're actually in talks with the government in Wales to open a training academy there as well. So it will be very much replicate what we have going on in London, and in Wales we kind of want to teach people, give them those apprenticeships, teach them in a real life factory environment, and show them that there are those jobs out there. And if they do want to set up their own label, kind of learn from the very beginning, learn how to sew first and learn how to pattern cut, and then you'll be a much better designer. So that's kind of what we've got going on there. And then the latest development, we've just kind of announced that we're opening a training academy in Leicester. So I don't know if you know about Leicester at all. Leicester has I think it's the second highest manufacturing cluster in the UK. So there's 1,500 factories in Leicester.
Wow.
But yeah, it's really is huge. But there's a lot of bad press. They don't have those ethical standards, and it's difficult for factories. So what we want to do in Leicester by opening this training academy is to work with the manufacturers and work with the factories and kind of teach them these ethical practices and teach them about the audits that we have. And we know it's not an overnight job. It's a lot of work to do, but there's this starting point that we've got now to have this training academy that will offer the courses. But like I said, it will really work with the local manufacturers and kind of prove how they operate, and hopefully also teach retailers how to work with manufacturers, just to make it completely compliant and ethical for everyone involved. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we're absolutely going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the price. We're so, as a society, we've gotten so used to low price points that it
Exactly.
puts a big squeeze on the manufacturer. And then from that
Yeah.
perspective, they're starting to cut corners, whether that's from the cost of the materials or the cost of what they pay the workers. And so what we've noticed is a lot of, having worked in a factory, a lot of the operations, even for example, buttonholes, we wouldn't put, some garments would be designed without them just because the hands-on machine time, it would increase the cost. But we operate as a for-profit, whereas I don't know whether that's, achievable to hit those high, we want to sit with higher standards of wages, because the challenge we face is that we're competing with other industries. So when we're trying to recruit sewers, they're comparing, especially the men will find better paid working in lawn care and construction than they will working in a garment factory. And that wage gets sort of stuck. It gets stuck at a certain rate, and there's no sort of progression plan. Perhaps they can move into pattern work and things like that, but for a standard industrial sewing machine operator, even at very successful companies that are here in the US, that wage it's just not competitive, especially if you're an educated individual. Do you have a
Absolutely.
similar challenge there?
So we did have, so within our factory in London, we actually have a system in place called Galaxius, and it helps the machinists. They work on performance related pay. So this is a system that we had implemented, I think about 5 years ago now. And I still think we're one of the only factories that have it. And it basically helps us to know who made what garments and how long it took them to make. So if there are any mistakes, that machinist is accountable for that mistake. But on the other side, depending on their speed and their accuracy, they can actually reach bonuses. So we do have some really well-paid machinists because each week they're going above the targets, and then they're getting bonuses on top of their basic pay. And that's something that we want to kind of introduce to other factories to kind of help them kind of regulate the payment of their workers. and actually, yeah, make machinists get a decent pay that they actually deserve, because they're so skilled.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize how kind of difficult it is to operate an industrial sewing machine. When we have our learners come on our Stitching Academy course and they're faced with an industrial machine for the first time, they just don't realize the speed at which it can operate. So
Mhm.
it is highly skilled, and some of our machinists have been doing this for like 15-20 years, and when you watch them, it's incredible how quickly they can operate it, and so accurately. So this particular software, Galaxius, completely turned our factory around. We were in loss before using that system, and now it really helps us in profit, and we've got a really strong workforce that stay with us. They want to stay with us, and I think that's really key when it can be hard to find skilled machinists now. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's definitely something we've got in place.
I think one of the challenges we also face here is there's this idea of, efficiency and the automation of certain elements within
Mm,
various stages of the production process. But these systems are pretty expensive for for a business. So especially for a factory like ours that we're just starting
exactly.
back up.
It is
And
expensive.
yeah, so if there is some individuals that are interested in this system that you guys are using, how would they find out about that?
So we've got on our website, fashioncapital.co.uk, all of our kind of policies, procedures, the way we work, who we kind of have communications with, is all on that website. So it's fashioncapital.co.uk, and then there's the search engine. So it's definitely worth kind of popping in Galaxius in there and having a look. Anyone's welcome to sort of contact me as well. I'll give you my email address at the end. But yeah, there's a lot on our website on Fashion Capital. I think a lot of your followers would be interested in terms of just kind of advice, really, just free business advice and what's going on within the industry, and kind of these compliance policies that we've got in place. Like, it's kind of interesting to, I think, share that knowledge, especially from different countries. So it's definitely worth having a look.
Let's say in the next 5 years, the Laura Ashley acquisition's amazing. Like that would be, even for our city to have that many sewing machine operators fully active. We have Under Armour headquartered in this city, and they don't have maybe 5 sewing machine operators because all of it's offshore. So what's a big goal that you guys are reaching towards, say, in 5 years from now?
I think it's to become more kind of fully sustainable and more ethical in terms of our working practices. So another kind of communication we've got going on at the moment, I don't know if you know of Cornet. They're a digital, they do digital printing,
Mhm.
and it's all about kind of creating a micro factory. So we're in communications with them. So it's really early days.
Mhm.
But this printer, it completely eliminates waste. So basically, the kind of the print is printed straight onto the pattern piece, and
Mhm.
then the stitchers then piece the garment together. So it eliminates a lot of waste, and it's very fast. So obviously this is a very quick moving industry, and people want everything now or yesterday. And this is something that can be done at very quick speed of response. So Cornet, that's really interesting for us, and that's something that we want to pursue, because it will just help us be even kind of more sustainable and more ethical. But yeah, I mean, the goals for the future are absolutely to kind of continue what we're doing, but it's kind of reaching that next generation and giving them the skills to progress into work. We have still very high unemployment rates. There's a lot kind of going on in terms of mental health, and we really want to support people and kind of give them that interest and help them with kind of getting a skill and getting a job, and helping them reach their goals, I think. And kind of like another interesting aspect we've got going on at the moment is we're working with Islington Council in London, and we are about to open up what's called an affordable workspace. So it's going to support local residents that are either entrepreneurs or they're thinking about setting up a creative business. And it's going to give them a really, really affordable space that they can have as an office. But it's so much more to that. We've got integrated support such as masterclasses, one-to-one mentoring, and alongside all of that, which we've already opened, is a retail unit. So it's kind of like that circular economy. It's helping someone from like the grassroots of giving them that kind of initial kickstart, and then at the end of it, they will have a product that we can then sell for them. So it can kind of help sustain their business. So it's anything like that really we want to support and help designers with, and people getting into the industry. So that's kind of the goals for the future, definitely.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this space, technically the factory is a 5,000 square foot space, but in terms of our needs, as we're kicking off, we're using about 2,000. So the 3,000 remaining is going to be turned into those entrepreneurial spaces.
It's such a good idea. Yeah.
So they get to see sort of if they want to take some of the classes or if they're working on their individual businesses. What we found, which is super fascinating, which I didn't factor in the equation, is there's still veterans in the industry that are working from home. And many of them are now wanting to take over like a small space to work alongside the entrepreneurs within their own businesses. So you're getting that cross-pollination of the generations. So, and then our longer term goal is to create what I call fashion factory land. So instead of thinking about fashion from the perspective of like, I'm a designer, I kind of create and you buy what I create, we want to create kind of like a shopping mall experience where you can go to the different kiosks, where if you want something embroidered for your nephew's birthday coming up, you go to that stand.
I think that's the future.
Yeah.
I totally agree. That's where I think it's heading, and that's where it should head. It's such a good idea.
Yeah, and it makes it a lot more approachable, whereby, you know, you've got this curtain of the manufacturer, which is sort of this a whole other world, and they, you know, pretend to speak a different language, but I think they intentionally try to speak a different language, whereby, you know, this customization is really a part of people wanting to be creative and allowing that access. And so, you know, having that shopping mall experience, but where you are actually designing not a full production run, but you can do embellishments and things like that. And if you do want a tailored garment, and also being housed in one place. So in New York, you know, you have the fashion district and you go shopping to the different ones, you know, 2 streets or so. But here the intention is we can have it on one industrial city block that covers a 42,000 square foot space that can expand and grow. So the small entrepreneurs can cluster and share sort of not only the economies of scale of space, but also become anchors to each other, and really harnessing social media. But that's sort of our longer term plan, in addition to sort of this online educational programming, to have this space, a physical space, because what I really love about fashion and what I learned in Indonesia is this sense of artisan community, where you're sharing what you're making, but you're also making together. And yeah, that's our longer term plan too.
That sounds like such a fantastic plan, and I think that is the way it's heading. And we've always said it's about being transparent, and I think getting people involved. Like we even have an open door policy at our factory, so anyone, kind of like the general public, can come to the factory and actually see how a garment is made. Like we can actually show them the process, and I think that's what this affordable workspace is going to be all about. There'll be exhibitions, the designers can invite press and kind of like their friends and family, and get people involved, and they can kind of help each other out. I think that's what it's all about.
Oh, that's wonderful. So the last question is, how do you guys keep your balance, especially now? And I mean balance, I mean wellness. I know, you know, doing the work that we do, it takes a lot of energy and time and mental space. And although I think we love it so much that to make time away, how do you and your team maintain that level of peace and harmony for yourselves?
Well, we have quite a close-knit team, really, in terms of even though we have so many different nationalities, our CEO, Jenny, every year she will take everyone to the seaside. So we all get on like a couple of coaches and we'll go to the seaside for like a weekend away. So obviously we couldn't do that this year, but actually later on in the year, we will be everyone from London will be going over to Wales so we can meet all the machinists and all the workers in the Welsh factory. So I think it's so important just to keep that communication, even though we've got such a big company now. I think we have about 250 employees, and that is such a wide spectrum of different cultures and different ages that I think having this kind of like yearly get together is really important. And then within the factory itself, we have parties, and which seem like an absolute distance away because we haven't been able to do anything like that at all. So we do a lot of online, like we have a lot of online masterclasses for our designers, and we can communicate with them that way via Zoom. So yeah, I think it's just so important just to keep that communication going, because some of us are working from home still whilst the factory is still open for the machinists. So you've kind of just got to all pull together and work together with this one, I think. But hopefully things are going to start to open up a bit and we'll get back to normality soon, which will be good.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all the inspiring knowledge from
Yeah,
your work.
no problem. It's been really interesting to hear from you as well, and kind of hear what you're doing. So I think, yeah, just kind of having that knowledge transfer is so important. So really lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see the themes. Although we're approaching it slightly different, there are patterns in the way that,
Absolutely.
in England things have shifted. Same here in the United States. So I'm fascinated to get a few more countries in the conversation and see what's
Yeah, you
happening.
should do. I'd be so interested to hear that conversation as well. Like, it's really good work that you're doing. Really fantastic.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if anyone wants information, we will have it here on the bottom of the YouTube video, and feel free to reach out to Fashion Enter, and then the website's Fashion Capital as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the main website, I think that your followers would find the most interesting, because it's really for designers in the industry, is fashioncapital.co.uk.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next time.